So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Phyllis Goodman from the SDMC to talk about data quality tools with SWOG reports and the CTSU DQP.
Thank you, Rodney. We're running late, and so I'm actually going to fly through some of these slides. I'm going to pass some because I know that people start getting angsty, but there are a couple of things I really wanted to present. So once again, we have these standard quality reports, our expectation, query, ineligible patient reports, patients and follow-up. The general message here is just these are our standard reports. If you have other ideas for reports, whenever I come to these meetings, people toss me ideas, and it's like, wow, we could do a report for that. Let me know, and we'll look into whether or not something like that is feasible. Once again, CRA Workbench, how you get there. I'm going to just fly through this because those are things you know. And the most important thing I really want to say about expectations is it's really our tool for communicating with you about what's needing. It's a communication tool, it's a learning tool, it's a way for you to plan your workflow about what is needed in the future. And what I wanted to also just highlight is for expectations, some of the little changes we've made this year, the expectations for specimens. Here was one for blood specimens, and I know that sometimes moving from the expectation report to when you go into specimen manager can be a little overwhelming. How do I find that blood submission? But when you go, and so here's like a screenshot of specimen tracking and that long list of specimens you're choosing from, and trying to find which is that specimen that will satisfy that expectation. That filter up top is relatively new. I think it's really useful. We've tried to really fix those expectations so it's clear how to get from the expectation report to here. You use that filter and you can really get down to a small subset of those specimens and much easier to find the specimen that will resolve your expectation. Couple of notes on specimens I just wanted to bring to your attention. If you have a specimen that can't be submitted, you're seeing something on your expectation report, it's been there for the last year, and how do I get rid of it? If it's something that wasn't collected, use that notify the specimen can't be submitted button. That will resolve that expectation. Another key things to know is if a specimen wasn't logged, the expectation won't get resolved, even if it was received by the repository. So if you say, I know I sent that in, the repository has it, I've confirmed with them they've had it, it may be that you didn't log it, so you can go in and log that specimen retroactively, and that will resolve the expectation. However, if you've logged a specimen, but you logged it as the wrong type, it also won't resolve that expectation. It's looking for some clear links between those pieces. So if you know I logged it and I said it was serum, but I called it blood, or however you might have done it, if it was done incorrectly, the only way to resolve that is to contact us, and we can do it on the back end. There's nothing you can do up front there. Once again, how we measure quality, we use our institutional performance review statistics. We updated the criteria in November of 2017. The two newer measures that we had are post-baseline form submission and specimen submission. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of how the sites overall are doing. You get reports every month that tell you how your individual site is doing, but we don't share with you how you compare to everybody else. So these were some metrics that were run based on the report at the beginning of this month. The compliance levels for each of those 4 levels is stated here. For initial form set, the mean or across all of our sites of our 3,150 SWOG patients that were registered in the last 13 months, we were missing initial form set on just 108, so only 3.4%, meaning at least one piece of data in that initial form set. The number of sites that, on the other hand, the number of sites that have 0% overdue out of 93 is 59 sites. So most sites are able to get everything in. And the number of sites that are over the compliance level is 4. So a small number of sites still do have problems getting those data in, but it's definitely a small number. If we look at those post-baseline forms, we have less than 1%, 0.6% of our post-baseline forms have not been received of those that were expected in the last 13 months. We have 40 sites that have 0 forms that haven't been submitted, and just 1 site that's over the compliance limit of 5%. I think the most challenging one is probably follow-up. That's the one I get the most questions about vital status updates. And of our 9,400 patients in follow-up for SWOG sites, we have 485 overdue, or about 5%. and we have 5 sites that are over the compliance limit. And here on specimens, you can see 3.2% of our almost 3,700 samples that were expected in the last 13 months have not been either received or the expectation resolved. So overall, I think we're doing quite well, but we do have some challenges with some sites. But a lot of times those sites will say to me, but other people must be having problems too. And some do, but generally everyone's doing really well. Of course, everyone is aware of the data quality portal. It was talked about last night. I think and I'm not going to go into much detail other than to talk about how the expectation report and the data quality portal, they differ. The expectation system has been around since the 80s. The data quality portal and RAVE is relatively new, and we just measure things differently. And so there's a summary here. I also have it on the website. The biggest thing, I think, is that our definitions just differ. Is that we call something overdue if it's more than 60 days over the day that it was due, the expectation was due, and it does not take into account treatment delays, whereas the RAVE report works on target dates. It's just set up differently. But there it's overdue if it's more than 15 days beyond that target date. Access, once again, we've talked about this in the past for difference of the pre-RAVE versus RAVE. Studies with calendaring only in RAVE will show up on that DQP delinquency. Our expectation report is more robust. It has forms. It has anything else that an expectation's been created for. DQP may have some things missing. Just the way some of the on-study forms, the expectations work is a little bit different. And then the way source documents work is a little bit different. We will have an expectation for every one of the source documents needed, whereas RAVE works on a log line, so it's a little bit different there. When I took a snapshot of where we were overall for SWOG, and this is SWOG sites and non-SWOG sites, for this year DQP metrics, there's 39% or 40% of our forms are less than 15 days overdue. The bigger problem is we still have about 19% of the forms that are more than 90 days overdue according to RAVE. And we kind of broke them down. There's no good way to decide if something is baseline or quality of life, but you can see the breakdown here of those 1,534 forms that are overdue. But I wanted to just focus, the common questions that I get from people is, how come I see blank on the SWOG expectation report, but I don't see it overdue in RAVE? You must be wrong. So I spend a lot of time investigating these and can usually come up with a reason, but this is a summary. Sometimes people can force a form into RAVE without updating the appropriate field on the SWOG that would update the SWOG database. So if there's a form asking for a last contact date and you don't update that last contact date, you answer the system query, you push that form in, well, that's great, except it hasn't updated our last contact date. So yes, you submitted that form, but it didn't update the data in a way that's meaningful to us. So it still shows up on the overdue vital status updates. Another common problem or problem I've seen is that the quality of life cover sheet will trigger the rollout of other forms in RAVE. And so if the form wasn't answered correctly, then that whole process behind it doesn't work. So the way the quality of life form works, the cover sheet is, was the fact done? If you say yes, the appropriate form rolls out in RAVE. When it's completed and submitted, the expectation's resolved. If you say no, the form doesn't roll out in RAVE, the expectation gets resolved. If you force that form in and don't answer that, if you leave it blank, and you have a system query and you answer the query, and in the text form you say the patient didn't complete the form, well, that doesn't help us. We look at yes, no's. So if you do that, what's going to happen is the form doesn't roll out, so it doesn't look like it's due in RAVE, but it also doesn't resolve the expectation. Some of the other kinds of things that will happen is that the source document was uploaded, but the wrong type was chosen. So our expectation looks to look for that path report, and it has to be a path report. If you submit it as an other report, it may not resolve that expectation. Sometimes also you can have a data point which will do some of this triggering of expectations. That data point was amended, so the time point was changed. So the form is already in our database, it's not updating appropriately. Also, if it wasn't a calendared study, so sometimes people say it's not showing up as overdue in RAVE, and it's like, well, that's because it's not calendared in RAVE. We only have 4 studies that are not calendared. It was discussed very briefly yesterday, and that's some of the back end of what's done. So these 4 studies, 0820, 1207, 1216, and 022 and 1221, aren't calendared. So they'll never have overdue forms in DQP. Yeah, so that what it looks like if it's not calendared, if it looks like if it's calendared. In terms of query reports, the differences between the query report, between what we run and what's in DQP, has to do with this rave and pre-rave. The query report includes, the SWOG report has just our data coordinator, our auditor monitors, and biorepository queries, whereas the DQP also has these system queries and these non-conformant data. Those don't appear in our report because those forms aren't ever actually officially submitted into RAVE, so we don't have them in our database. We don't currently measure overdueness. That may be something that changes. RAVE has their measures of overdue. In terms of queries, the number of queries as of April 15th was 3,400. Most of those were, as you can see, the breakdown, 25% of those are more than 90 days since that was posted, that they haven't been answered. Cite from system, over 1,000. Cite from data manager is 2238. Data manager meaning our data coordinators. A couple from monitors, a couple from the repository, and I met with them yesterday. They said it's been very successful for them being able to post in RAVE. It's been a good communication tool. And then non-conformant data is another subsection of them. So just general comments about DQP. Currently, we view it as something that complements our expectation and IPR report. If there are inconsistencies, we ask you to work towards the SWOG reports, as that's how we currently measure your site performance. Some other things to note, I just really want to go to the third bullet. We have these things called ghost queries. So if there was a query on a log line or a form that got subsequently deleted, that query kind of lives in the ether. And that is, you don't see it, we can't see it, and it's kind of like, where is this coming from? Contact us with those if you're like saying, I don't know where this query is coming from, I don't see it, and we can do an audit look and find out where that query is and resolve it. Once again, if there's inconsistencies, contact me or Rodney. And once again, right now, we see DQP as a tool. We don't know what that long-term use is, but my guess is there is a plan. We just aren't quite sure what it is.